The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Wednesday. We do the happy finger dance on Wednesday because on Wednesday a lot of really exciting things happen here. We start out with Ask Dr. Doreen. Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh will be with us in just a few minutes, and that's your opportunity to have an expert, a true expert in the field of autism, answer your questions directly in real time. And then a little bit later on in the program, we have Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson join us for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. She's another autism mom, and she's the executive director of Autism Care and Treatment Today, a really wonderful charity that helps to give grants to families for the things that they need, that they specify. So if it's trampoline that they need or they need fencing, they can apply for a grant for that specific thing. Really remarkable organization. So, and today we have a very special guest, Starr Taxman, who is a consultant and an advocate that, and there are many of these around the country and around the world that you can hire when you're having difficulty. So Starr is going to be here talking about what kinds of things that would prompt you to hire an advocate to represent you as you're seeking services. So that will be very interesting a little bit later on. We have a lot of stuff in the news. One thing that I want to mention, first of all, before we get too far, I want to remind you that this show is meant to be interactive, so we hope you will give us your input, that you'll be writing in, asking questions for Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh and also for Starr Taxman a little bit later on in the show. Emily's going to show you some of the different ways that you can get in touch with us here at the studio. I'm going to remind you that you can go to www.autism-live.com. When you go there, you can watch the live show if it's that time of day, or you can watch the most recently recorded live show. You can actually pick through a lot of the most recent episodes to watch them there. But there's also a live feature there. Next to the screen where the show plays, there's a white box. Put your cursor there, type whatever you'd like, hit enter, and it shows up magically here on the screen, and we can discuss it during the next live show. It's a great way for you to ask a question. Remember, it's free. There is no login. We don't know who you are. You maintain complete anonymity. So it's very exciting. I also want to remind you that Dr. Granpeesheh is going to be doing an event in Florida. It is a free seminar entitled Creating a Comprehensive and Individualized Treatment Program for a Child with Autism. And that will be on December 5th at Edison State College in Fort Myers, Florida. It's from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And again, it is free. If you're in the Florida area and you would like to meet Dr. Granpeesheh in person, and trust me, that's a worthwhile thing to do. She is amazing to meet in person, life-changing. So I would encourage you to RSVP. You can only attend by RSVPing. You'll want to RSVP to d.plump@centerforautism.com, and there is limited seating, so you can RSVP up till December 3rd, but I would be willing to bet you that it will be completely full by that point. So I would encourage you to do that as quickly as possible. RSVP to d.plump@centerforautism.com. All right, we are going to take a break, and then we will be back with Ask Dr. Doreen. Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh will be here answering your questions. Stick with us.
Hi everyone, Thanksgiving is fast approaching, and we thought it'd be really fun to teach you a gluten-free stuffing recipe with help from Breads from Anna. Now this is a 2-day recipe, and so day one we're going to make this bread. Here's what you're going to need. 1 package of Breads from Anna bread mix, 1 packet of active dry yeast, 3 eggs, 1 tablespoon apple cider vinegar, 2 tablespoons sugar, 1/4 cup of oil, half a cup of warm water, 1 teaspoon ground sage, thyme, rosemary, 1 tablespoon of dried parsley, and then a pinch of tarragon, onion powder, marjoram, and garlic powder. On day 2, when we put the stuffing together, here's what you'll be needing: 6 tablespoons of butter, half a bulb of fennel, 1 chopped onion, 2 chopped carrots, half a cup of gluten-free chicken broth, 1 teaspoon of ground sage, thyme, and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt and pepper. All right, step 1, we're going to dissolve our sugar into our water. And then we're going to go ahead and add our active yeast. We're going to dissolve all these together. So we're going to just set this aside. Now we're going to take our bread mix right on over to our mixer. So first things first, we're going to put all our liquids together before we add in our dry bread mix. We're putting in 3 eggs, our oil, apple cider vinegar, water, and our water, yeast, sugar mixture. We're going to blend these all together. So once our liquids are all mixed together, we're going to go ahead and add our bread mix. We're also going to add all of our spices now. Okay, now that our bread's been mixed, we're going to spoon this into a bread dish and we're going to let it rise for about an hour. Okay, so now that we've let this rise for about an hour, we're going to bake it at 375 for another hour. All right, it's been an hour, so let's grab our bread out of the oven. We're going to let this cool for a little bit, and then we're going to actually cube the bread, and we're going to toast it in the oven just a little bit longer to dry it out so that when we add it to the vegetables, it'll make a really great stuffing. So as you can see, we've toasted our little breads here in the oven, and now what we're going to do is saute some of these vegetables so that we can mix it in with the bread and make our final stuffing combination. So we'll start with the butter. So we're going to start with our onions so that we can make sure these are good and cooked before we add the other vegetables. They cook a little bit longer. Okay, those are looking pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and add our fennel, our carrots, our garlic, and then all our spices. So you're going to want to cook this until the carrots especially are nice and soft. Our vegetables are pretty soft here, so what we're going to do is go ahead and mix this with our bread. We're also going to go ahead now and add our half a cup of broth. So once these are mixed together, we're going to go ahead and pour it into our greased baking dish, and we're going to bake it an additional 20 minutes at 350 degrees. All right. Okay, I think it's ready. La, la, la. All right, and we can add a little garnish here. Perfect, and it's ready for Thanksgiving dinner. To learn how you can win some breads from Anna, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/autism-live. Until next time, happy holidays.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism, and now you get to ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is here with us in the studio. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
So thrilled to have you here and answering our viewers' questions, which the live feature is open. We're getting a flood of them. You can continue to write in your questions, and Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh will be answering them as fast as we can take them. Do want to give a disclaimer here at the start of the show that no one on our program ever can give child-specific advice.
Right.
Disservice to the child. There's no as brilliant as you are, there's no possibility that you could get enough information in this format to give child-specific advice.
That's correct. It would be very unethical if I attempted to do that. So okay. I definitely don't. If we say something here that the listener feels is just doesn't apply, then just forgive us. Maybe give us more information about your child, and we'll do the best we can. But really, most important is that you take our advice and go see professionals that we recommend and try to get more child-specific advice there.
But having said that, this is a wonderful format for you to ask questions of a true expert and visionary like Dr. Granpeesheh, so you can start to know who to ask. It can save you time and energy and money by knowing where to start, getting an idea of what questions to ask next. So we're going to jump right in because we've got a bunch of questions. And this person was very diligent, wrote on both the Facebook and the live feature. It gets it done, right? So the question is, for Dr. Doreen, is self-talk a form of stimming? Shall we stop a child from doing so, and how?
Do they go into anything else about how they're defining self-talk? Just
no.
Okay, so maybe if that you're watching, maybe you can write back in and describe exactly what you're seeing. But what I'm assuming is that you're talking about the child just talking out loud, but not necessarily to anyone else. We would possibly refer to that as out of context speech. And it is considered one of the self-stimulatory behaviors, but I find that our kids will sometimes hear things on TV, for instance, or on the radio, or in a conversation, and then they'll try to use that type of speech or that specific phrase in other scenarios, so they actually use it to communicate in some ways, even though it might not fit perfectly. If you have a child, if I'm not understanding, and if what you're talking about is more the child like talks themselves through things, then I don't know that I would consider that to be a self-stimulatory or ritualistic type of behavior. It's almost as if the child is just verbalizing what they're thinking. Sometimes we do see that with our kids, where they will vocalize what they're actually thinking, and they don't know quite the difference of, you know, keeping it inside their head versus verbalizing it, and that's not a very difficult thing to teach. So in that case, I wouldn't be concerned about it. You know, the thing with the self-stimulatory behaviors is more that if it's something that prevents the child from paying attention to anything else, or if it isolates the child when they're doing that, then you want to try to replace it. Otherwise, as I've said before, we all do various self-stimulatory type things just during the course of the day, and so it's not something to really worry about. But again, because I'm not sure exactly what the topography is that you're describing, self-talk, that's sort of the best I can answer that question.
And I was very rudely, I was listening, but I was messaging her because she did such a great job of putting it on the Facebook as well. I was messaging her saying, Dr. Doreen is answering your question right now, so that she could tune in if she wants to give us some more information.
Absolutely.
That we can further answer that question.
Great.
So great to know. Okay, I have a somewhat lengthier question here. Dr. Doreen, I met you quickly in Victoria, BC with my guide dog. And I know you meet a lot of people, but that's a remarkable thing to meet somebody with a guide dog. I wanted to ask you about my 7-year-old son who is nonverbal, flight risk, sleep disorder, very smart, and very lovable son. He had 200 picture-prompted words until he was 5. Then we medicated him for a horrible sleep disorder after diet melatonin supplements did not work. He slowly lost all of his words. Currently, he is on 3 mls of risperidone at bedtime only. We have investigated seizures, biomedical reasons with no answers. He has just started saying tickle at school in the last 2 weeks with one of his EAs, once or twice. Any help or ideas you can offer would be greatly appreciated. We miss his little voice. And then she writes, thank you. And she did send some contact information.
That's great. So let's review that a little bit. He's 7 years old.
7 now, nonverbal.
Nonverbal, and he used to have a lot of visual icons, I think, is what they were saying.
200 picture-prompted words.
Okay, and now he has 1 word. So what I would do, and also, of course, sleep is a really, really critical factor for all of our kids. But it sounds like your child has a lot of different medical issues going on. I don't know where sleep is now, but you definitely want to make sure that sleep is effective or is happening. Risperidone or Risperidol, same thing. It's an antipsychotic medication. I don't know that anybody would recommend it for sleep. It tends to reduce everything. So antipsychotic medications basically sort of reduce your overall ability to respond, so they kind of numb you down a little bit. I assume there's a reason that he's on that other than sleep, perhaps, but it isn't, usually physicians will prescribe that for if a child is extremely, let's say, aggressive or hyperactive, out of control, that sort of thing. I'm not sure if your child is benefiting from it, needs it. You would know that better, and you should consult with your physician on that. With regards to sleep, I've always said, melatonin also doesn't work for a lot of my kids, but then when they switch to tranquil sleep, which has melatonin and tryptophan and theanine in it, then it works. So you might want to try Tranquil Sleep for sleep. It's a chewable, and you can get it everywhere. You can order it online. You're in Canada. I'm not sure. Yeah, you can order from Amazon. So you do need to regulate his sleep, and you need to make sure that he's physically feeling good. And, of course, if he requires those medications, then, of course, you keep him on the medications. But having said that, in terms of his communication, and he's 7 and he's now entering a phase where it becomes more and more important to be able to communicate. And if he doesn't have a way to communicate, he may develop behaviors, challenging behaviors, because he's frustrated, he can't communicate. So I would strongly recommend that you reinstate a picture format. So I don't know what you used in the past, but what we typically do is we'll start with a PECS program, which is really just a series of pictures, and PECS is a very good system. I mean, the whole world uses PECS now, and so kudos to Andy Bondi, who made it years ago. But it is just one of many, and it's essentially a system that takes you phase by phase and teaches the child how to point to an object or touch or give an icon or a picture in order to get what they want. And then what we do at CARD is we'll transfer that knowledge to a iPad. Sometimes for some of the kids it works better if we just go to an augmentative device rather than an iPad. So it really has to do with the preference of the child, and some of the things that we want are, the AUG devices provide more than the programs for the iPad. But Proloquo, there's several other things now that you can use for touching icons. But you need to do that for sure, because the fact that he lost those skills doesn't mean that he can't regain them, and the fact that he's beginning to verbalize doesn't mean that you should just go down the verbal path. So I would use the visual library or the iconic system, and then you can also start to have him imitate some of the sounds in the labels. Typically, when you start a visual program, you are starting with what we call MANs, or the things that the child would request. So obviously those would be, whatever, juice, drink, food, activities they want, people they want to be around, and those are all on separate pages. And the child has to be able to identify each one. So it's a process. I mean, you have to teach each icon and then put them on a page so that the child starts to develop some system of telling you what he wants. But you can also, as the child is like touching the icon or touching the iPad, you can also say the word of the label of the object and then prompt the child to imitate. So therefore, you're not necessarily just giving him a visual system, you're also giving him the ability to start vocalizing if he prefers to do that. Some of our kids do actually vocalize a lot faster. They learn to vocalize a lot faster if they have a visual library. And then on the other hand, some of our kids never really develop language, and instead they prefer to use the visual library or the PEC system. So that will make a huge difference in his life, obviously, because he'll be able to imitate. Now, I'm trying to think. I don't know on IBT if we have something about visual programs. I can't imagine we don't.
I'm
right?
pretty sure that there is.
Yeah, so I would recommend that this family perhaps look at IBT's website, which is the IBT stands for Institute for Behavioral Training, and I believe their website is ibehavioraltraining.com.
Yes.
And if you look there, you can search under the parent section or even under the professional section, and you'll find separate modules, and I'm sure you'll find something that talks about how to use a visual system, a picture exchange communication system. It might even also have something about how to transfer to an iPad, and that'll guide you through the whole process.
Absolutely, great advice. And we're going to go to a break, but as we go to a break, I want to let everybody know that what she was just talking about, iBehavioral training, starting next week, we're going to be giving some of those trainings away and are pushed through the holidays.
That's
so you're going to want to tune in to see that. And each week we're going to be giving away one subscription to Skills for 6 months. So one per week. So you're going to want to, along with a lot of other gifts and surprises that we're going to be giving away. So that all starts next Wednesday during Ask Dr. Doreen. You're not going to want to miss it. Like a 5 weeks free of gift giving, things that you can win. But you have to watch, because at some point during each hour, a word will flash on the screen, and then you'll have to write in and say what the word is, and then we'll pick from that hour at random somebody to win that gift.
That's wonderful.
Really going to be exciting.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, Skills, in some cases, honestly, the feedback I get from parents having used Skills is like it can be life-changing for our kids.
Absolutely is. I can attest to that. My IEP's changed, life-changing as a result of it, so I'm a big fan of Skills. So we're going to be giving away those and more, so you'll want to tune in starting next week. Let's take a short break, and we'll be back more with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh for Ask Dr. Doreen after these messages.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. For November, we're going to be working on memory with our kids, and what better way than doing a scavenger hunt. The materials you'll be needing for this activity are a camera, cardstock, scissors, glue, and whatever objects you want your child to be hunting for. Step 1, you're the hunter. Find all the objects you want your child looking for and take photos of them. Now that you've collected all the objects you want your kids hunting for later, print out the images and then cut them out and glue them on a cardstock just so they're organized and isolated. Now that the scavenger hunt template is done, put all the objects back where they belong. Remember, we're working on memory, so put them in places that your kids would normally find them. You want them to be successful. We'll make this one really easy to find. Well, I hope you enjoyed this activity with your kids. Remember, the scavenger hunt is supposed to be a fun way to work on memory. Well, until next time, craft on, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here live with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, an expert in the field of autism with so much experience.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thousands of children across multiple decades.
You embarrass me. You have to stop.
No, I'm sorry, I can't. There are lots of things I can stop, but really you are a visionary in the field of autism, and it's such a joy and a treat to be able to sit here and hear your questions for Dr. Granpeesheh, because don't kid yourself, I learn a lot every Wednesday. It's very thrilling. So next question. We don't have any more information than this, but somebody says, how do I stop my child hitting?
Right.
We don't know age.
Right. So these are the easy questions actually, and we can go pretty general on those, because hitting, with our, and I'll sort of repeat this, and many of you who are repeat visitors to our site, you know that I always say this, but hitting or any kind of challenging behavior is just communication. It's a form of communication. So the key to stopping any kind of behavior, and this is not just our kids, any child, any person, is to figure out why they are hitting. So when you see two adults get into a bar fight or something, there's always a reason, right? They don't just randomly start hitting each other. They fight because someone said something that offended someone or whatever. So that it's anger, right? So they're trying to reduce their anger and feel better, however. With our kids, so the concept is, the easiest way to look at it is just to say whatever behavior we have is to gain something or to avoid something. And so your child's hitting either because they want to gain access to an object, we call that a tangible function. So they want to gain access to not necessarily an object, something. They could want to gain access to a toy, they could want to gain access to an activity, to a person, to a place, whatever. They're just wanting to gain access to something. Or they're trying to avoid something. So they might hit because they want to get out of the classroom. They might hit because they don't want to take a bath when they're supposed to, change their clothes when they're whatever. They're trying to avoid something. So what you have to do is figure out why they are hitting, and then you have to not allow the child to get the thing they're trying to get. In other words, you're trying to teach the child that this form of communication is ineffective. So if the child's trying to avoid a situation, then you make sure, by hitting, you make sure that if they hit, they still have to face that situation.
Immediately, right? With no pause.
With no pause. And if they're trying to gain access to a tangible or something, then you have to make sure they don't get access by hitting, okay? So by doing that, you've pretty much made hitting ineffective. It no longer functions for the child. It no longer gets them what they want. Now you have to also teach the child a more appropriate way to get what they want, and an easier way.
Yeah.
So let's say hitting takes a certain amount of effort. Perhaps if it's a verbal child, just using a label is not going to take that level of effort. Maybe touching a picture of something is not going to take that much effort. Maybe asking for a break is not going to take that much of effort. So you need to teach the child. So these two things kind of have to happen at the same time, where you're not letting the challenging behavior remain effective in getting what the child wanted, but you're teaching the child something appropriate so they will do that appropriate thing and then get what they want. And there's a million different examples of how you do this. The techniques involved are just, you really should have a behaviorist, or you can go on IBT and learn some of the techniques of teaching basic language, teaching basic communication skills, and modifying. I mean, I think there's actually a section on IBT called reducing challenging behavior, and this would fall under that. But that's the basic, very easy principle. Is the only reason we do these things is because it has an effect. It's effective. So make the hitting ineffective, like make it have no function for the child, and it will stop.
It's amazing how that works, because we've been through a couple of cycles with hitting where I thought I wasn't going to make it.
Right. But hitting is hard. It's hard.
It's hard, but it works.
Usually it's just the child's frustrated and they really want something and they can't vocalize what it is they want, and so they hit. And typically we will, whether they're with another child, if you hit another child and grab an item, you're going to get your thing, so it's going to be effective. Or if you're with a parents usually try to figure out what it is the child wants, so then again it becomes effective. And it's a hard situation, and just beware that when you first start let's say not allowing the hitting to get something, or not allowing the hitting to be effective anymore, you probably get a burst of behavior. So let's say you ignore the hitting or you block the hitting. Usually I tell people not to ignore or put on extinction, because hitting can be dangerous. But if it's a smaller child and their hitting is not really, it's pretty innocuous, then you can like sort of ignore it. But when you do block or ignore, you typically will get an extinction burst, sort of an increase in the behavior before it goes down. And that's just because from the child's perspective, they're thinking, wait a minute, you know, I used to hit and get my thing, and how come they're not giving me my thing anymore? So I'm going to hit a little harder. I'm going to maybe scream as well as hit, whatever. Just during that phase of the burst, just make sure you just keep doing what you were doing. It's effective. Just keep doing what you were doing, ignore or block the hitting, and every time the child does hit, you replace it with, let's say, the icon or the more adaptive and more functional, appropriate behavior that you want the child to do, and then eventually the bad behavior will extinguish and the more appropriate behavior will grow.
Okay. We've had a couple of different questions that have come in from different people about, do you have any offices in Asia? Specifically, they're looking for what's the closest office to access from India, one person, and somebody else wanting something in Calcutta.
Yeah. So in India, we actually we don't have offices there yet. Our closest one, in Asia, we're only right now in, we actually have affiliate sites. So we don't have card sites, but we have affiliated sites, and we have one in Bangkok. That's not necessarily close enough to you. So, but we do have families in India. I know that we have other children in India, and we would love to do an affiliate site in India because there are so many families in need. So I'll talk very briefly about how affiliate sites work. Have you ever had John on this show, by the way, Shannon?
No, we have not.
So we should also maybe have John Galley on this show one time, who's the director of expansion and remote services. And I don't know if you've had Kat Minch.
We have had Kat on the show.
Right, and Kat, of course, is now the clinical director of expansion and remote services, and the two together are a dynamic duo. What we do with our affiliate sites is that if there's a group of parents and perhaps there's a school or a, like for instance, the one we just did in Bangkok is a gentleman who has he has his own business, it's a completely different business, but he wanted to have a center, obviously, for his own child and for many other children there. And so what we do is we come in and we help you set up the whole center. We will help you hire and train. We will train staff across the board, whether it's therapists. We will actually send our own supervisory staff to stay there for long periods of time. Like right now, I think we have maybe 3-4 people in Thailand. And they will hire and train new therapists, and they will do all the programming. So we will send supervisors from the US or from one of our other sites to you, and they will do all the programming. So they will set up the lessons for the children, and they will train the parents. They will show you how to do all the therapy, show all the therapists how to do the one-to-one therapy. And, you know, so as that grows, then we take staff from the actual site who are good therapists, and we promote them, and we bring them out to the US even and train them as supervisors. So essentially, we act as your advisor and trainer, and we then will stay with you for 3, 4, 5 years. I think we're going on our, I'm not sure now, 4th or 5th year with our South Africa affiliates, and we will take you through everything, whatever it may be, whether it's management advice or training or difficulties with children or schools or whatever it is. I mean, as we've said before, our South Africa affiliate started with one site. When I first went out there, we let go of much of the staff, and I think they went from, like, I think maybe they lost some clients because the clients were afraid of all the changes I was making. And we started with, I think, maybe 7 kids, 8 kids, I'm not sure. And now, of course, they have, I think, 3 or 4 centers and growing, and everyone in all of Africa goes to them, and they're fabulous. Yeah. Starr Academy, just fabulous people. And really very well-trained staff, amazingly well-trained staff. So it's very possible to do something like that in India. We would love to do something in India. That whole region, the Middle East, basically, and that area really does need some help.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of times, I can't speak with authority to this because I didn't have to do this, but I've met some of the parents who have been instrumental in making that happen in their area of the
Right.
world. And they're just like the rest of us, but they just had a moment one day when they realized, you know what, if I don't do it, I don't know if it's going to happen, so I guess I'm going to do it.
And
You know?
exactly, and it's so amazing because not only do you help your own child, but you end up helping hundreds and hundreds of other families, and it's incredible. It's
Yeah.
such a wonderful thing to do.
It is amazing what one person can do.
Right.
So if you don't know, I'm going to say maybe you're that person today.
Yeah, maybe you are.
It's life-changing.
And we will, honestly, I mean, the team, John Galley is a spectacular individual, and he travels all over the world, and he does this constantly, and he's such a fabulous clinician as well as such an incredible human being. He's just a delight to work with. And Kat, our clinical director of expansion and remote services, is such a incredible clinician, and I don't think I've ever had a family who hasn't loved having her as a supervisor. And so, you know, they're a really good team, and they can work with pretty much anyone, and they're very good at what they do with the kids and in training of staff and so on. So it's very, very doable. We will help you research and find funding in your country. We really recommend, and you know what I want to say is very quickly that one of our administrative staff here, who was really one of those like superstar administrative people here, who actually helps organize remote services for us. Her name is Doreen. She had to leave the U.S. and went back to India. So she actually currently does all of the organization of our remote services from India.
Wow.
So, you know, I'm pretty sure she would also be ecstatic if we were able to start something up there. And hey, she's
Absolutely.
there. She
There
can
you
help
go.
even more. Yeah.
It can happen. So make sure that you take advantage of those resources. And
if you are interested, if you want more information about that, please go on our website, centerforautism.com, and go on just email in and say, I'm very interested in doing something in India, or I think there might even be a tab for remote services.
There is. If you go under services, you can go to remote services. Okay, we're going to move on to a question about, it says, my daughter is 3 years old now. When she was 1.5 years old, she used to speak a few words. After that, her words regressed, and she won't speak any words. This is the sign of regressive autism. My question is, will she gain her words back again?
What age was she when she lost words?
1.5.
Yeah, that's the...
Well, at 1.5 she could speak. She's 3 now. We don't know exactly when she lost.
Yeah, that's basically the typical pattern, which is usually between 1.5 and 2.5, where our children start to lose speech. Yes, a lot of children do regain speech. It takes a lot of work to reteach these labels, but the fact that she regressed and lost speech does not mean that she will not speak. I don't know the percentages off the top of my head, but I do know that I've had many regressive kids not only learn their speech, but go ahead and recover all the way. So the regressive factor, you know, this is partially why people have a feeling or have said in the past that it might have something to do with the vaccinations, because usually that's when we're getting our MMRs at 18 months. And a lot of parents kind of feel, you know, and actually it's gotten lower, I must say. But, you know, for many years, parents would come to me and say, oh, it was right after the 18 months, like 24 months is when my child started to regress. But don't let that scare you. There's nothing scary about I mean, it's obviously it's scary, but the fact that they lost labels, although it's probably pretty horrendous to experience that with your child, don't give it too much meaning. You know, your child can regain. You need to start doing intervention. Your child's at the right age. This is 3, is the perfect age to be doing EI, BI, or early intensive behavioral intervention. So please start doing that and really give your child their best possible outcome.
This was my child. And my child
there you
speaks
go.
like a magpie now.
There you go.
But he was speaking in full sentences before he was 2, and then right before his 2nd birthday lost virtually all of his language.
There you go.
And he speaks like a magpie now.
Right.
So, but you do, as you said, you got to get on it. It's not something you
panic.
let go.
It produces panic. I know, because
Absolutely.
I mean, it's one thing. Both. I don't know. You know, there's not one is not worse than the other. You either see your child not developing, so they plateau when other kids are developing, or you see your child developing and then losing skills. They both are horrible experiences. But you know, just get on the horse and ride it. You trust me, you can do it, and your child can absolutely improve. You know, test your child's, as I always say, make sure your child is healthy and doing well, and then they can learn from behavioral interventions.
Absolutely, I concur. If you don't mind, I'm going to keep on because we've got all these questions.
Please, please.
So, next one. My child is 8 years old, and we have too many negative statements. He is diagnosed with Asperger's with ADHD comorbid. Usually, he can learn any concept. But the example that they're giving here is we cut with scissors, and immediately he transfers it to I'll cut your head with scissors, I'll cut you, etc., and many such verbal behaviors. We ignore this behavior and redirect it to more positive and constructive tasks, yet I'm unable to break this cycle of his negative statement and aggression. And with new teachers, he would always shout, yell, throw things, and say, shut up. Can you please help?
Yeah. You know, our kids don't really mean the things they say. They only say them because they have received a horrifying reaction, and it has now become kind of an interesting game where I can definitely get a reaction out of either you or the teacher or someone when I say something like this. And I appreciate that you guys are ignoring it now and kind of redirecting or saying something else. I think that the whole process of redirecting to something else might have become attention. In other words, just engaging in any kind of interaction when your child says this sort of thing is no longer, it no longer qualifies as extinction because you're kind of engaging in something, and or it's possible that the teachers or someone else in his environment is reacting to this. So
sometimes it can just be the kid in the back of the room and you have no idea that it's happening.
Exactly. So he's continuing to receive attention for this. I mean, it's hard for me to advise you because I would want to do an FBA. I'd want to know a lot more about the child before I actually respond to this. But realistically, I think you need to continue, you need to ignore the behavior, really, because it's one of those things that I guarantee he's doing for attention, and you just need to kind of move on. Now, in terms of giving him positive replacement, you can do that anyway, but just don't do it only at the time when he says something negative. If he says, I'm going to cut your head off, and then at that moment someone goes up to him and says, no, we don't say that, we say blah, 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 then he's definitely getting attention. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the ideal situation would be he can say it 100 times and nobody really cares. Extinction is you really ignore the behavior. And it's a pretty harmless behavior, quite honestly. It's just a statement, so you could ignore it. Mm-hmm. I know that other people, if they don't know this history, will not ignore it and will freak out about it, and you need to really have a conversation with everyone at school, in all environments, and so on and so forth, and ignore it. At the same time, you know, I don't know what you're doing in his behavioral program. You know, first of all, let's correct the fact that if you have a diagnosis of Asperger's, you can't have a diagnosis of ADHD. I love how people just do that. I've done that in the past. Asperger's was kind of taken out of the diagnostic criteria in DSM-5, the new diagnostic criteria. So now you have ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and you could modify it by saying it's Asperger's type. And this is the very first year ever that you can also have, ASD and ADHD. Up to this year, you never were allowed to have the diagnosis of Asperger's and ADHD, autism and ADHD. So since Asperger's is gone, and you know, it can't be. Right. You either were diagnosed years ago or now. So essentially, let's not worry about labels. Let's worry about the symptoms. So Asperger's tells me that he's high functioning. Your child's high functioning and possibly has his deficit is mainly in the area of social and not necessarily speech. And then the ADHD tells me that your child's probably maybe on the hyper side. I find it rare that there's two types of ADHD, but usually it's only diagnosed if the child's extremely hyper. Right. The other type is inattentive type, and nobody ever diagnoses that. It's kind of interesting. So I don't know what the symptoms of your child are, but given that he's high functioning, I would really recommend that you become a user of skills. And I want to market our products all the time, but the truth is that not too many people know how to handle kids who are Asperger's or really high functioning kids, because ABA generally people who do ABA are teaching pretty rotely, or they're not really teaching advanced concepts, what we call advanced concepts, and a person of a high functioning person would really benefit from learning things like perspective taking. Like, clearly your child needs to learn that when I say something like this, it scares people, it horrifies them, I shouldn't say that, those types of things. And there's too many lessons for me to go through them right here now, but I guarantee that if this parent went on the skills cognition curriculum and the executive functioning curriculum, you would find pretty much everything in there your child is not able to do. Everything in cognition and EF, and social probably, and those are the things you need to focus on, because as your child learns to improve in the cognitive, executive functioning, and social arenas, they won't do these behaviors anymore. They won't need that negative attention seeking.
Okay.
Very long answer, I apologize.
No, but I just have tons more questions here. Hi, Dr. Doreen. This makes me feel so low, but my 10-year-old still cannot say yes, no correctly, consistently. If he thinks a bit before answering, he may get it correct. But usually he just says something, and based on what happens, he corrects himself. This makes it difficult to teach him visual perspective-taking activities such as can mom see the cat, etc. Any tips for making his yes, no concrete? Presenting him with a strongly preferred item with a non-preferred item evokes correct answer, but all others, such as is this a lion, etc., my son is just not interested in getting the answers 100% correct. Any tips would be highly appreciated. And I just want to say, this is the kind of thing that and they start out by saying, this makes me feel so low. This is the kind of thing that tears at a parent.
That's amazing to me. It's just so, because, and those are the, as much as Shannon and I try to feel what the parents are feeling, these are the types of things you never know unless it's your own child. You just don't know.
This kind of thing is just devastating.
Right.
Because you feel like you're making progress and you're doing all these things and you want to progress to the other things. But if there's something, and we talk about it sometimes on the show, that sometimes our kids are like Swiss cheese. There's holes in places, and if we can figure out how to plug the holes, they bloom and flourish.
And that's exactly right.
But sometimes the hole is gumming up the whole works.
Yeah, but it's little stuff like this, and that's why, when you do behavioral intervention, you meet with your supervisor pretty frequently, and that's their job. Their job is to problem solve these things. Mm-hmm. So this is, and I'll give you a couple of different answers because I just don't know your child very well, but so one thing you could do is you could, you said that the child does get it correct with concrete mands.
When it's something he really cares about.
Right.
Not when he doesn't.
Right. So I would go to abstract mands, so things that are, not actual objects, but do you want to go swimming? Yes or no? I don't know the child, so I don't know if he's not getting it or if he just doesn't care. When you say he doesn't care, that to me means that regardless of his answer, he ends up getting the object. So, because otherwise, if you wanted something, like let's say, do you want to go swimming? Do you want to go out? Do you, whatever? And if he really wanted it, then he would care.
Well, one of the things that, going back over the question, she says that sometimes that he'll just say something, and then based on what happens, he'll correct himself. So
Okay, so don't allow him to gain access to the item unless it's correct on the first trial.
okay,
So that's very simple. That's one way to do it. Because you don't want him to correct himself. In other words, what you would do is if he corrects himself, you say nope, and you walk away and you wait maybe a minute, 2 minutes, and you come back, or maybe even maybe just a minute, and you come back and you ask again. And this time, of course, he will say the correct answer, and then you can give him the object. But you separate it with 1 minute.
Okay.
The second thing you can do is you can use what's called a receptive prompt for an expressive response. So in other words, you could simply say, you could ask the label of the object you know he wants. So, you could say, what is it? And he'll say it's a pen, and then and let's say you have 2 objects, and you won't ask, what is it, cup, because the one you want him to answer is this one.
Okay.
So you'll just say, what is it? Pen. Good. Do you want pen? And then he'll figure out that the one that he gets a receptive prompt for is the one he's always supposed to say yes to.
Okay.
Okay, and then you'll rotate, and then he'll understand that. But the key to this is only giving the one that he says yes to first.
Okay.
Okay, and then he'll understand it. This is I have never had a child who doesn't overcome this.
Okay.
Don't worry about this. This
Okay,
is easy.
so
if you do it right, you will do it.
Lots of opportunities in keeping it consistent, I imagine, and rewarding when it's right.
Right.
Okay.
And if you need, I don't know where this parent is, but really part of me always wants to say this, and I don't, if you really need advice and help on this, try to give us a call and let's see if we can give you a supervisor who can kind of walk you through these steps.
Okay, spectacular. Hello, Dr. Doreen. Is there any advice for how to teach organization skills? For example, taking so long to do homework, or sometimes not able to finish it, or forgetting things to do from schools, needing to ask a friend, which sometimes friend also forgets, so she ends up with a bad grade for that. Age 15, high-functioning autism. I need any type of help. She doesn't like to get into her business, and I'm laughing because that's so age-appropriate at 15. And she is smart, able to keep up with her grades. However, as advancing into high school, things are declining. Thank you for your comment on that.
Okay, so it's funny that you have this problem, because that was many years ago when our little guys started to hit middle school. We realized that we really need to do a lot more intervention in the planning area, and it was exactly because of this issue that in elementary school they give you homework, you go home, you do it that night, and you turn it in. In middle school they give you homework today and it's due like a week later or in 3 days or whatever it is.
Scares me.
So it's very interesting. So we started teaching our kids journaling. I really actually do recommend for you to go into skills, because in the executive functioning section there's a whole ton of stuff about planning and organizing, specifically in relation to things like this. So what we do is we teach our kids to, on the day that whatever instruction is given to them at school, on that day, so first of all, she needs to have a journal, like a calendar, or what is it, like a
planner.
Planner, thank you, a planner. So on the day that it's given, she will write the homework that's due, and she will also write it on the day that it's due. So she'll write it here and she'll write it there. And she will also write at the very bottom, you'll put a section where she'll write the book that's required to take home that night or another night. So it's a matter of writing it down in the right place when the instruction is given. Now, for these particular things, we even actually made a bunch of other types of sheets and forms to help the child organize themselves. And these are like basic forms that we've made where like, I have to go to the beach. What are the things I need? I need to go back to school, or these are the things I need for that activity. So it's a good section to go into on skills, because it really does help and give you a lot of ideas of, and it's visual for the child. So it's like, this is my activity. So it says activity, and then it says things needed people to ask help for, places to go, all that sort of stuff. So it helps the child organize themselves. It really just, and by the way, this is not something that's just your child. Most kids have this problem in 6th grade because they don't know how to organize themselves. And then what teachers say, which I think is very helpful as well, is do the homework the night you get it, not the night it's due, not when it's due, but when you get it. And that way you'll always be a few days ahead.
I used to teach junior high and high school, and I can tell you that having read through the executive functions curriculum, I wish every single junior high school and
It's
high
so
school
helpful,
student
right.
in the world had to take that we would solve so many of the world's problems.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, I should get my son to look at it.
I learned from it.
Yeah.
I've gotten better. I need to do more, but I got better just reading through the curriculum at some of the things that I was doing. It's eye-opening. It really
Yeah,
is.
it's good. You know what happens with our kids, and I'm glad you said that. I should actually go back really for, like, a lot of our kids, they rush so much, they don't even want to take I have 2 daughters and a son, right? And my 2 daughters, they actually take the time to neatly write out what they're supposed to do, so they always know, they never forget. My son, you go into his backpack and there's loose pieces of paper, who knows where they came from or what they are, but that's where he writes his notes, and it's, when you're rushed for time, you definitely don't do the things you're supposed to do. But if it becomes part of, we're all, like at night, we are all tired, everybody wants to go to bed, but hey, who doesn't brush their teeth? Everybody does, because it's a part of your routine, right? So, if it becomes part of the child's routine, then it really does help. And there's also, as you said, Shannon, there's also stuff in there about study skills, like how you can organize yourself to memorize something or learn something, and how many times you should read it, or when you should read it, and all that. So that should help.
There's even handouts on how to pack your backpack so that papers don't get crunched.
Right.
I mean, it goes from that to really extensive lessons that any adult could benefit from, of how to plan for a goal and go through all the steps and check whether you're getting it done.
Right, that's good.
It's really amazing.
Great.
So I encourage you to look at that. Okay. I'm rushing you through things and not allowing you to take a break. Good afternoon. My son has ADHD and is very impulsive. Sometimes he unbuckles his seatbelt while I'm driving and hits his brother and throws items around the car.
Oh, boy.
He has hit me in the head before. I pull over and remove the other child from the car and resume driving when he is calm again. What else should I be doing? It's very scary for me. Thank you.
This is very scary indeed. This is one of those situations where, I assume it's not possible for you, but it really, you should have another person in there controlling his behavior. Or the only alternative you have is there are certain safety seat belts that cannot be unlocked easily. So you need to prevent him from unlocking his seat belt, and you need to make sure there are no items in the area where he can pick them up and throw them. That is very dangerous behavior. In addition to that, I think this is a child with just ADHD, right?
Yes, that's what
you
it
should
says.
have a response cost system. So in other words, every time, this would be a system that would be positive and negative. So, first of all, practice this with short durations of driving. So like, for instance, you would have a token system in place for the child where if you don't throw anything, you're going to get this token, and if you get 3 tokens, we're going to go out and get you ice cream. That's just the basic format. And but you start with just drive around the block, really, and you want to practice this. This goes back to one of those things, which is like, it's do it as a lesson. Don't just try to teach your child during life, because during life you have the other sibling in the car and it's dangerous and all that. You just do this 5 minutes a day with your child, or multiple times, but short trips. So you put the child in the seat, they put on their seatbelt, and they don't throw anything. If they throw something, you go back to the house. They don't get a reward. If they don't throw anything for 5 minutes, you will go and get an ice cream. Maybe you can go back home and give them an ice cream, or whatever it is. That's a reward. And then you make the 5 minutes 10 minutes and 15 minutes. And in the beginning, you would not have items in reach. At the end, you want to have items in reach because you want to sort of tempt the child and still be assured that he's not going to throw things. And then you would eventually get to a place of safety where you can have the sibling in the car. But what I'm saying is you kind of go back to just treating this as an individual lesson and start with very, very small requirement, high level of reward, and then increase your requirement and reduce the reward. I hope that makes sense. That was a quick answer because we're out of time.
I know.
Essentially all I'm saying is just, don't try to teach him during the middle of crazy life.
Right.
Take the time to actually do it as a lesson if you can.
Really remarkable advice. Emily, I assume we're out of time. Okay, we have time for one more question. Okay, because we had two questions about yeast that I was really hopeful to get to. So I'm going to take one and then add some elements from the other. If I can find them now. What did I just do? I scrolled and I've lost them. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
Finding them. Okay. Hi, I'm currently treating my son's yeast with natural remedies like grapefruit seed extract, olive leaf extract, UVA ursi, biotin, and probiotics. For the past 4 days, he's being really, really hyper. I know it's probably die-off reaction, but we've been doing this for about 2 weeks and a half now. So why are we seeing the die-off reaction now? I thought it was supposed to happen like 2 to 3 days after starting the detox. I don't know if I should keep on this track or just get prescribed medication like nystatin. If I decide to stay on this regimen, how long should I do it for? His stool test showed moderate candida. What do you think, Dr. Doreen? I heard that after the candida dies off or is under control, the results are beautiful. Thanks for all your help, you guys. And then somebody else also said that they're having trouble. They know that they mentioned that, Shannon, you mentioned before your son had yeast, you could smell it. My son has that urine yeast smell on his body. It reeks. And trust me, I'm a clean freak, so I keep him clean. He's been on the GFCF SF diet and corn-free and no sugar, no fruits, diet plus, all the supplements. Also, this child, different child, was on diflucan. Seriously, what else do you do? Doctor advice about a yeast, and thank you, and God bless you.
Great. The yeast is a difficult thing to deal with. It's probably the most difficult thing. For the parent who's doing sort of the non-medication route right now, I would say you keep doing what you're doing. Because you're using natural foods to release the yeast and get rid of the yeast, it takes longer. If you were hitting him strong with something like nystatin or Nizoral or diflucan or whatever, it would actually, the die-off would probably happen faster. It would probably be occurring maybe third day, fourth day in. But when you use sort of a natural type of method, it will take a while longer. But I recommend it. So I think what you're doing is fabulous, because when we tend to use the grape seed extract and all the different things that we're doing, that you're doing a fabulous mix of all the things you're supposed to do for yeast. It tends to be more of a long-term solution. When we use medications, and this now goes to the second family, a lot of times there's this kind of die-off and then increase of yeast again, and up and down, up and down. So I personally feel that the most effective is to use the dietary restrictions and to keep the child on the dietary restrictions for as long as you can, because you see, it's not just our kids. It's not like yes, it will take many years for you to replace the gut bacteria through probiotics. And due to our food source here and the fact that we're not exposed to enough germs, we simply do not have anywhere close to the bacteria that we should in our guts here. And I'm talking all of us, not just our kids, all of us. And that is leading to a lot of other types of inflammation, chronic problems, skin problems, all that sort of stuff. And so maintaining a diet that will actually help keep yeast to a minimum is a very good idea anyway, for as long as you can. And it doesn't have to be as stringent as you are now, but I would stay at this level of strictness on the diet for at least a few months, and then I would see how the child is doing. And for the other family, I really do think that you might want to, in addition, and you know, a lot of the physicians will do lower doses of things like diflucan or nizoral on a longer term. So instead of doing like a 10-day trial or something, they'll just put your child on a lower dose, and you'll be giving your child ongoing every third day and so on for a few months. But what I recommend for you is to do the types of dietary changes, because that will really help. Now, having said all of that, you should probably also go on Julie Matthews' website. She does have a lot of information about yeast and how to control yeast. There are various other dietary changes that can help as well that we didn't talk about here today, and stay with it. It does take a while.
Absolutely. We still continue to work on it. The two things that I will say that I noticed early on is that very few people talk about when you're trying to de-yeast your child, removing yeast from their diet. A lot of parents are still feeding, like, you know, the GFCF pizza crust that has yeast in it.
Right.
And that can be really important. And the thing that was said to me recently that I went, oh, why am I not doing this, is look into the Saccharomyces boulardii.
Yes.
That's a form of probiotic that you have to get separately.
Yes.
And that I know somebody had said that to me a long time ago, but just recently it came back up on my radar, and I went, yes.
Yeah, it's true. But it's
I think
still
it's Dr.
hard.
Berger that brought that up
Really?
on the show.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, good. That's very good.
Yeah.
So I didn't know you got David on here.
He was on. He's going to appear semi-regularly.
Oh,
so,
it's terrific.
Really
I love
wonderful.
that. That's wonderful.
I adored him.
Yeah, he's
I thought
great.
he was amazing.
Yeah,
so.
good. I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah, thank you for recommending it.
And if we could maybe, what is Julie's website?
Nourishing Hope.
Nourishing Hope. I really recommend that. She's a fabulous nutritionist. You might even want to consult with her.
Absolutely.
Because she will advise you much better.
Really, really remarkable. Okay, we've gone way over now,
Okay.
and I know I've kept you from all kinds of things,
No
but
problem.
this was great. I feel such a responsibility sometimes. We got in as many questions as we could, but we worked you hard today, and thank
It's a
you
pleasure.
so much.
See you next week.
I do want to say that coming up the Wednesday right before Thanksgiving, which is the 27th of November, that is when we're going to do the anxiety show. Dr. Granpeesheh has been talking about that for quite a while, that we would take just one show and talk about anxiety. So
Right.
we're going to make that November 27th. That will be the anxiety show. So you'll want to make sure that you tune in for that. And don't forget that starting next week, we're going to be giving away something, probably a skills subscription during
Wonderful.
Ask Dr. Doreen. You're going to want to tune in for that. We're going to go now to the A Word. This is the ongoing documentary being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, following Jack Riley, a little boy who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2, and he has been having his early intensive behavioral intervention now for over 2 years. You can watch the entire series on their YouTube page, but take a look at this installment of the A Word.
I know a cute little blue-eyed boy, and his name is Jack.
Jack Riley.
He got a big, warm, blue-eyed soul that makes your heart beat fast.
Exciting.
I say Jack, Jack, Jack is my buddy. Jack is my buddy. Everybody around is so down with Jack.
We had Lainey checked this week by the regional center, and they say no autism, but she does have a little expressive speech delay. Can you say up, please? Can you say please?
Please.
Good job. Mwah. Jack Riley a kiss? You want to? Oh, here she comes. Give him a kiss. Oh. That's so nice. Can you give him another kiss? Maybe a hug. Can you give Jack Riley a hug? Oh, Jack's giving you a hug. Didn't want to put my head in the sand and think because she's ahead of where Jack was that means she doesn't have any issues.
We're glad we did it. We did it just because our only experience with a child is autism, the A word. And so we didn't know what a typical child is like in our own home. And we're 99.99999% sure we have, now we have a typical example in our house. They're both extraordinary though. She actually has the perfect emotional makeup for a typical sister of a A-word brother. She, now that he used to knock her over and stuff, now when he starts to take a step toward her, she just stares at him and screams. Ah! It's hilarious. And he backs down. Can you say please?
Please.
Can you say thank you? Okay. Can you say thank you again? Thank you. Can you say dad? Can you say anti-disestablishmentarianism?
Where's my waffles, Daddy?
You want me to make you a new one?
Yes.
Can you look me in the eye and say, yes please, Dad?
Yes, please.
No, you're not looking at me.
Yes, please, Dad.
Okay, I'll make you another waffle.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hi, it's Lisa Ackerman back for What's Left. I got a nice guest with me today.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
We're going to make some healthy banana nut bread with no eggs. Maybe what you could do, Kristen, I'm going to add the flour.
Okay.
If you can get the bananas ready just by mashing them for me. So I'm going to go ahead and add our flour. Here's 1 cup of my all-purpose flour. I'm going to go ahead and add my baking soda and my salt and my xanthan gum. A ½ teaspoon of the salt, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and xanthan gum. Xanthan gum is great, but you can also use gar gum. We can use flaxseed meal if we want to use a different binder. Remember, this is what helps keep your gluten-free flour held together. We're going to also add 1 cup of our organic cane sugar. There's a lot of variations on this as well. I can use maple syrup and honey and cook with it. That's a great way to go, but be careful, you may need to add some more flour into the mix. How are you doing, monkey?
I think it's
Perfect!
I can now say I officially mashed bananas.
You mashed the monkey bananas. So I'll go ahead and take your mashed monkey banana. Thank you very much. All we did, Kristen, lovely Vanna White, is mash up the bananas, getting ready to go for our dessert. So let's go ahead and add egg replacers. We've gotten a lot of feedback from y'all about not using eggs, and I know eggs are a big issue. So we talked about this. We're going to use a little flaxseed meal and arrowroot starch, and I love these, but whenever we use a dry ingredient, and you know an egg has a lot more moisture than these, so we want to be a little kind and maybe add a little water or more fruit or, you know, a coconut milk or something along those lines. So for this recipe, it calls for 2 eggs. So I'm actually going to use 1 teaspoon of each of these. Look at me using measuring devices. And add that into my mix, and that would be in place of any eggs that you would want in that recipe. Next up is the cinnamon and the nutmeg. This gives it the yum. Now, for kids who are really sensitive to different spices, you may want to go a little lighter on these. So for nutmeg, this calls for 1/8 of a teaspoon, so you really want to go light on the nutmeg. In fact, that's one you could probably cut back a little bit for kids who are really sensitive to smell or taste. And cinnamon, I love cinnamon. Did you know cinnamon has some antibacterial properties?
Yeah.
I love this stuff. So anytime I can add cinnamon to whatever, if your kid tolerates it, it's a great antibacterial. So I love that stuff. If you have a nut allergy, forget the nuts. But these are the chopped walnuts per the recipe. This is a ½ cup of chopped walnuts, and I've got my lemon zest. And again, I love lemon zest. My son has grown to love it as I cook for him more often. And then the last thing that we're going to add here in our recipe is the ½ cup of oil. Thanks, Vanna White.
You're welcome.
And we'll go ahead. I use grapeseed. You can also use the different Earth Balance soy-free margarine melted.
Okay.
That would be great. That gives a good texture. Awesome. Our mix is ready to go, Kristen. I'm going to put a little oil on the pan. And I love the consistency. Like you were saying, this looks a little bit like a thick pancake mix. Are you ready?
I think so. I just want to make sure I'm not the one that doesn't make it come out.
So again, it is a bit of a thicker texture. I'm going to go ahead and grab as much as I can out of my little mixing pan here. So let's go ahead and put this in the oven, 350 degrees for about 40 to 50 minutes, depending upon your oven and how long you want it to cook.
Ooh.
And this is what the finished product looks like. Yum!
Looks
so
yummy.
For me, this is probably one of the most nutritious, fun things that I can eat. I'm going to have you try some so you can tell me what you think.
I'll be happy to be the guinea pig.
Such
Ooh,
a
it
great
smells
texture.
so good.
So there you go.
Yummy.
I know. But go ahead and give it a shot and tell me what you think.
Let me see. That was really good.
Yeah,
It's
give me some
moist
of that.
too.
Thank you for joining us here at Autism Live. We've got a great, wonderful snack or breakfast that we can serve up for our kids. That's healthy, ready to go. Kristen, thanks for joining me
Thank
this
you for
time.
having me.
Love
That was
having you
fun.
here. And we'll see you next time at Autism Live. What's left? If you have any questions, you can email us at autismlive@gmail.com or hit us up on Facebook, facebook.com/autismlive. And if you need more recipes while we're in between shows, go off to the TACA website, tacanow.org. Click on gluten-free, casein-free, soy-free recipes and have a ball. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod, and your Lucy was hilarious last week.
Your Ethel. Lucy is nothing without her Ethel.
Well, I think it's quite the reverse. I think you could have been anywhere and people knew that you were Lucy. I was unrecognizable without a Lucy.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm fiddling with my headpiece here, but I went over to a meeting at the Commons shopping center, and a couple of people asked me if I was a Lucy impersonator.
Honey, I thought you worked it enough that you could have been.
And then, I don't know, I got a lot of reaction to that, and it got me to thinking. That's
Which
not
is
a good
what a
thing
Lucy
sometimes.
does.
A Lucy goes, woo, what could I do with this? What could I, because Lucy always wanted to be in television, because Ricky, was the star. So Lucy always enlisted Ethel with her schemes.
Yes, exactly.
So I have a scheme to enlist you with, Ethel. We're going to do a regular Lucy and Ethel segment where we cover things that are in the realm of autism, but they might have a slightly comic element to them. I'm starting to think the first thing we might do is bake or cook something that's GFCF and good for our kids, or maybe a good treat for the holidays, or how to do dressing, and the other thing that I'd like to explore here is my green drink, which I've started doing every morning, and I'm a proselytizer. I'm running around telling everybody it's changed my life because I'm off coffee somewhat and never completely, and it's given me so much energy in the morning, and I want to maybe that'll be our first episode where I'll bring in my kale and my celery and my beets. It's kind of messy.
Okay.
I'll warn you. But wherever Lucy and Ethel are, there is a mess.
It's going to get messy. I'm picturing the chocolate episode where they're jamming the chocolates.
Well, we're going to be jamming kale.
Okay. I like kale. I'm a big fan of kale. I like to make kale chips.
Kale is so good for our kids. Let me tell you, I'm on a kale soapbox.
It's good for the perimenopause too. They tell me
it's good for everything. Kale is a superfood. It is the highest nutrient. So if I can drink that every morning, it's got to be making a difference, right?
Absolutely.
I tried in therapy to have my son drink it. He promptly threw up everywhere.
Well, have you tried the kale chips with him? I can get Jem to eat kale chips.
Yes, the kale chips he will tolerate, but yeah.
I quite like those.
Okay.
So we'll have some kale fun as Lucy and Ethel. How very exciting. So we have a lot of stuff in the news. We want to start with a story that we got from Autism Daily Newscast. They're partnering with us. And this is about our good friend Temple Grandin, who we adore and that we hope we're going to get an opportunity to speak to next week. The headline here is Temple Grandin puts weight behind campaign addressing trends in autism awareness. Temple Grandin has long been an autism advocate, being amongst the first to write about her experiences with autism and producing a plethora of books on the subject. The 66-year-old professor at Colorado State University is to add her voice to a campaign to raise awareness of trends in autism awareness after saying that more research needs to be done into the way that autism affects people's senses. Speaking via telephone to Canadian press about sensory difficulties and sensitivities, She said they vary from a nuisance to being very debilitating. You've got some people you take into a loud, noisy supermarket and they just can't take it. They sort of feel like they're inside the speaker at a rock concert. You can't socialize them if they can't stand the environment. She believes strongly that trying to socialize individuals who are experiencing sensory overload is nearly impossible, and believes that more money needs to be injected into research for this specific area of the condition. Grandin herself used medication to overcome some of her symptoms, including anxiety, which she believed were exacerbated by her sensitivities to the environment. And of course, this story, as I mentioned, came to us from the Autism Daily Newscast. If you want to read more on this story, more quotes from Temple on this subject, and to hear more about the campaign that she's getting behind, you'll want to visit www.autismdailynewscast.com.
And I think this is really important in awareness, that Temple is saying that some of the sensory issues are what are keeping our children from reaching their fullest potential.
Absolutely.
And I've long believed that. I've long believed we don't know enough about it. In her latest book, she goes into more detail on this, and it was very eye-opening to me to realize some of the things my son might be experiencing, that we don't take that moment to realize that they have a totally different reaction to sights, sounds, touch, hearing than we do. And we always put our belief system on something where we're coming from, and I think this is going to result in some very beneficial changes.
Absolutely. This is where we need to take on some perspective taking.
Perspective taking, exactly. Okay, you ready for me to get on my soapbox?
Yes, get on your soapbox, please. Let me get it out for you.
Okay.
I'll roll it out for you.
Okay. Here's a story that I don't get. This is in the... Why do we have to spend time on things like this? It should be so simple. Mom forced to prove son has Down syndrome. This is out of, I believe, Australia. And Travers Brown is 33. He has Down syndrome. He was born that way. He will die that way. Okay, we know that. You cannot cure Down syndrome after a child has it. They're born with it. But every time his mother applies for any kind of change in his work and income disability allowance, the two of them have to front up to the government department to prove his lifelong condition has not gone away. This happens up to 4 times a year. Annoying, not to mention time-consuming, in return for less than $60 a week. The issue is a historic one, disability advocates say. WINZ, I guess that stands for Work Insurance, it doesn't...
New Zealand, I
New
think.
Zealand, fails to recognize lifelong conditions and forces those with disabilities to prove themselves constantly. His mother said her son had recently moved into a flat with 3 other adults, which is great. It sounds like he's becoming more independent, and therefore changes had to be made to the amounts he received from the allowance. And each time he had to have his condition verified by a doctor. The disability allowance is a weekly payment for people who have regular ongoing costs because of a disability. And the maximum allowance is $60.54 a week. This woman, his mom, says she understands public money needs to be accounted for. She gets that. We have to constantly go back to our GP, though. It's a small amount of money. They put so much bureaucracy into it. There doesn't seem to be a database anywhere. Surely in these technically advanced times, we could do something about that. People can know if your dog is not licensed, but not whether you have a lifelong condition. I don't know. There's something off with this picture. There is no information shared across systems or within systems. It's really distressing when you have to prove this all the time. It's distressing and expensive. And the Labor Department has heard many other situations like this, and they're saying that their response is people's circumstances do change, including costs, so we need to keep them constantly updated. Well, having Down syndrome is not going to change. So I put this in the, I don't know if there's a petition or if there's some way we can help on this situation, get things changed, but it needs to change, and it needs to change now. No one should have to be dragged through this 4 times a year for a lifelong condition. Do you agree?
I agree. It's a common sense issue, and what it requires is a politician to get behind it and say, that we just need to make a designation of permanently disabled. That's what they do in other countries. And then when that happens, I mean, obviously there are some people who are disabled with different things that are not lifelong, and they would need to check, but a permanent disability, enough.
Yes.
Stop torturing this family.
Exactly.
Doesn't
And
make
others
sense.
like it.
And others like it, absolutely. Lots of other stories in the news here. One about the statistics in New York State and how often they suspend their students and the percentage of those students that
With
are special needs.
Yes, which was very upsetting to read this.
Absolutely. This is according to analysis of the Department of Education data. It's their own data, showing in 40 different schools that they looked at. The majority of the suspensions last year went to students with diagnosed disabilities. And we've got a quote here from Kim Sweet of Advocates for the Children of New York saying, "I think the disproportionality is a huge cause of concern. And my hope is that would be a red flag to the Department of Education to get into these schools and really figure out what's going on."
Suspensions, is that really a best practice for dealing with a child's misbehavior in school that is diagnosed with a special need? I don't know that there's any data that suspension would be helpful to a situation like this. Would that seem at all
But we
reasonable?
see this all the time, that schools have this one-size-fits-all rule system of here's the behavior that we allow, and if you break this behavior, then you're gone. Instead of looking at it from a scientific point of view and saying, what is the intervention that we have for behavior, they send them. But often we know that kids, not just on the spectrum, will engage in those behaviors to be sent home.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It sounds like they're doing a very good job of rewarding negative behavior here by letting these kids out of school. So, I know in the autism spectrum world, with a child with autism, if you get away with something by getting a reward, well, I'm going to do that again. So this is really kind of backwards.
This is really bad thinking.
So this is yet another one that get with the program, people, figure it out.
And they are saying that we're providing professional development to schools to address this. Of course, schools can't totally do this on their own. So I'm hoping that they seek out really good behavioral interventionists who will use science-based practices to combat this, because this is wrong. There we go. I'm on my soapbox now.
Okay. So, another story that video could transform how schools serve teens with autism. This was an interesting new study that used video to teach expressions and to teach social interaction. And they're finding that it really is helpful using iPads and laptops, and they're inviting peers to interact with one another. They had a facilitator show students, footage of people helping one another to clean up a mess and, learn that camaraderie, and then they had them do it in the classroom. So they're saying that this could be a good answer to places where one-on-one instruction is not available, that they could show this video-based learning instruction and get more for their buck.
And I don't know if you saw the email that I sent you this morning. Angela Persicki from the Autism Research Group actually came in and introduced this study to us about a week ago. But I wanted to cover it again because we had so much email from so many different organizations writing to us saying people have been writing to us asking for this study that you talked about, because there was some misunderstanding about who did it, because Autism Research Group didn't do it. Some people were writing to ARI, the Autism Research Institute. But this was actually done at MSU. So I did want to cover it again because this is really exciting to a lot of people, the idea that we can use video and do great group training with video and have it be effective for social skills for teens. Very, very exciting. But again, the study was done by MSU. So if you're looking for the actual study, that's who you want to hit up for that study.
And it basically proved that video instruction is helping kids learn social interaction and communication.
Well, what they
at
did
a higher rate than other forms of instruction.
Right. Well, they put them together in a group and gave them iPads to watch a video. And so they watched the video and then they got up and interacted with each other and tried out the skill that they were being taught on the video screen. Then they were giving a rating about it. Some of them were told, great job, move on to the next lesson. Others were told, you need to go watch the video again. So they sat and watched the video again, and then they got an immediate opportunity. So it wasn't solely video, but the video is what was teaching it, and then they gave them practice within the group setting immediately. And what they found was that overwhelmingly the kids learned in that method of instruction so much faster, and then it stuck. It really stuck because they could watch it, finesse it, get up and do it, and then finesse it again, and it was very effective. So I hope we see more of this. And people have written into us and said, where can we get the videos?
Right.
It's a study, so we're hoping that it will disseminate quickly.
Right.
But very exciting.
All right, that's very cool.
Yes. The next study.
Another something else thrown into that pot of what causes autism.
For me, this was another big duh.
Okay.
Sometimes I say, oh, well, gee, like we didn't know this.
Children whose mothers have lupus might be at increased risk of autism spectrum disorders. Children born to mothers with a diagnosis of systemic lupus are almost twice as likely to have autism, a recent study found. Now that is a huge number, twice as likely. And this was done by the American College of Rheumatology. It's going to be presented, or it was presented at the end of October. And the study looked at how certain lupus-related antibodies and cytokines affected a developing fetus's brain, and compared it to thousands of controls. And so the numbers, essentially, they compared 719 children born to 509 mothers with lupus. And the lupus, the team found that while children born to mothers without lupus had a 0.6% of risk of being born with ASDs, those born with mothers with the disease had a 1.6% risk. So
it's double. I would like to point out, too.
Why was your first reaction? Because of the autoimmune?
Yes, and I want to talk about that in a second, but I also want to point out, if you're watching and you have lupus, the study was able to rule out that the result was not from medication. That's a very important component of this, because I know people look at this and go, oh, well, it's probably the medicine that the mothers with lupus, they were able to rule that out. And I feel like, the reason why this was a duh for me is that I've done some very informal research on this on my own, because I have autoimmune issues. I do not have lupus. For a period of time, they thought I had lupus, but I don't qualify for lupus. But I went to an ARI conference once upon a time, and it was right after I'd been diagnosed with my autoimmune disorder, and they were talking about the immune system and going through a whole series, and the speaker stopped at one point, and she said, I just want to take a poll of the people that are in the room, and it was predominantly mothers, but there were some dads there, and she said, how many of you here in the audience have a child on the autism spectrum? And almost everybody raises their hand, right? And then she said, okay, now I'm just curious, how many of you have been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder? Same amount of people, pretty much. Maybe 2 people didn't raise their hands. And for me, that was a moment when I went, okay, who are we kidding here? Clearly, there's something going on here.
That compromised immune systems.
In the mom.
Can result in a compromised immune system in the child.
Well, there's I don't know, which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Right.
But something's going on that needs to be looked at. So I'm glad that they're doing these studies.
Yeah, because it says, hopefully, I was going to say, what's the bottom line of this study, other than getting moms with lupus that are trying to get pregnant very nervous?
Right.
They say, hopefully this study... My mic slipped over.
Okay. Other side.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
Did I fix it? Okay. Hopefully this study will prompt further research on the potential role of lupus-related autoantibodies, such as N-methyl D aspartate receptor antibodies in ASD. So what they'll look at is the lupus-related autoantibodies and see how that relates to children with autism spectrum disorders or individuals.
And I would say, because this is of particular interest to me, having compromised immune system, and my son has a compromised immune system, there are lots of studies that are being done. There are lots of doctors, that are working on this. And if you're in that space, some great doctors who can give you help. There's something called being tilted. If you have been exposed to environmental toxins that possibly have exacerbated your immune system issues, and then ways to minimize it. There's some strategies, protocols that you can do to minimize your exposure so that you can be healthier longer. I can tell you a couple of years ago, I couldn't be sitting here doing this show.
Interesting.
But we changed some things, and I can.
I'd like to know more about that because Wyatt has hyperactive immune disorder.
Okay. So maybe that's something, there are a couple of doctors I can think of that we can get on the show and talk about what tilted is and what you can do, how you really clean up the environment. And you can go a little way with it or you can go a long way. But, you do what's right for you and what your immune system will handle. But it can make a big difference.
Right.
So don't just feel like it's of no use to you. There are things you can do. All right. Should we take a break and bring our guest in and maybe hit some of these other stories?
Yes, these other stories later.
Move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a wonderful guest today that I'm really excited to have with us, Starr Taxman. And she is going to be talking with us about
transition.
Yeah.
Older kids in the system and some of the work she's doing with that. Are they going on to vocational schools? Are they going on to college? This is a huge issue.
Absolutely.
And it's right around the corner for you and me, my friend.
And I understand that Starr's going to be telling us some things that we can be doing much earlier than when they're a senior in high school and you go, okay. I mean, I know there are some of you that are watching and saying, I need to know because, he or she's a senior in high school or they're 1 year out of high school. What am I doing? But, it's not too early for us to start is what I understand. So we're going to get some strategies for both ends of that. So you'll want to stick with us, Starr Taxman, when we come back.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's going to play football, he's going to do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT?
What did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting two battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called, and they informed me that he had received a grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle. Without that, they wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready?
There you go, got it.
Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear ACT Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. You know, we underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community. Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and we are now joined by our special guest, Starr Taxman. Welcome, Starr. And Starr, you are a advocate specialist. Is that what you would call yourself?
Yes.
In the greater Los Angeles area. And tell us the name of your company.
Starr Children's Advocacy and Investigative Services.
Okay, great. Now, you are focused on a particular area right now. Can you tell us about your focus?
Yes. I've been focusing on the population of special need people or who have disabilities and disorders who are entering the adult market. Okay? They're transitioning from high school to now they're out of high school. What are they doing?
Yeah.
Some are college bound, some are not. About 75% of our disabled population is unemployed. And those figures are not counted in our unemployment figures.
They're not?
They're not.
Why is that?
Very good question.
Okay, all right. Well, we don't need
That's
to
a
get
very
stuck
good
on
political
that.
question.
Let me, this obviously is an area that demands our attention right now as a society.
Absolutely.
Why is it so important that we look at this and make changes?
Because families have fought for special education services with the school districts for years and years and years. Now all of a sudden their kids who have had a lot of services are 18 years old. Some of them don't want to go to school anymore. So maybe they haven't graduated high school, but they're dropped out and they're adults.
Right.
Doesn't matter how severe their disability is.
Right.
So they sit on their parents' couches, okay, or they take to the streets, and if they're on medications, a lot of times they become non-medication compliant, and there's nothing families can do unless they have conservatorships. And those laws are all changing as well.
Right.
Okay, so I work with these families from the time their kids are from birth through, it has been through high school. Now I've expanded my business through college age.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we're going to come back with more questions.
Absolutely, because we want to talk about what we can do if we're already in that boat and what we can do when our children are younger, because you had mentioned the things we can be doing to help prepare and make a difference.
Yes.
But Starr, before we go to break, tell people at home what's your website so they can go and get more information about your organization.
Okay, my website is www.starradvocacy, and my name is spelled with 2 R's. So it's STARR advocacy.com. And also, I'm not only working in Los Angeles now, I have now gone
You're global?
All over the country.
You're global now.
I'm going all over.
All right. Okay. So she can hop on a plane to be where you need her to be.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay. So we're going to talk more with Starr and get some ideas about what we can be doing no matter which phase of this transition we're at, whether we're already knee deep in it or approaching it. Stick with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
The Institute for Behavioral Training provides courses in applied behavior analysis for the treatment of autism. Access IBT e-learning videos on the move and learn at your own pace.
I'm going to talk a little bit about intensity of
IBT e-learning makes any location your classroom on the go.
So our objectives for today are to really learn what is autism and how is it diagnosed.
Get professional guidance with IBT face-to-face training. IBT face-to-face training courses prepare you to effectively implement ABA-based interventions. Choose between small group and one-to-one instruction. Earn BCBA supervision hours via one-to-one video conferencing.
So I had a chance to review your BIP today. You know what? It looked really good. You did a good job with it.
IBT continuing education courses. Earn credit through webinars, conferences, article reviews, and e-learning videos. You can learn more at ibehavioraltraining.com. IBT, 360 degrees of ABA training.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy and I are here right now with Starr Taxman. She is an advocate specialist, and she's really focusing right now on that transition period. How do we get our kids ready for it, and what do we do? What's essential that we do in that transition period to make sure that our young adults become happy, productive, employed adults?
And we were just yak on the break because Shannon and I
we're chomping at the bit.
We're chomping at the bit here because we want to know what can we do if these kids that you're seeing now, they're failing 75% of the time. This is not working. They're unemployed. Yes. And what can I do? I have Wyatt's going to be 12 on Sunday. What do I need to be aware of? What does Shannon need to be aware of? And parents listening to set their children up for success now.
Okay, this is an outstanding question. And the number one answer that I have for you is for your IEPs to include a vocation assessment and a transition assessment. Okay, now you can't do it at 12, but you can start preparing.
Okay.
That's number one. All right, and then, and the school districts tend to sit at an IEP meeting and say, and often the child will be in there, let's say at age 16, and they'll say, what would you like to do when you grow up? And the child may say, I want to work for Subway. Okay, I want to work for Burger King.
I hope
whatever.
Wyatt doesn't be a engineer on Thomas the Train. I hope.
But an engineer is great.
I hope we're past that then.
Well, I know, then you can send them to the a toy manufacturer.
Okay, great. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. So that's the kind of thinking outside of the box that parents need to seriously look at.
But you said we can't do it at 12.
The school districts, you definitely do it at 16.
16.
Okay. Absolutely at 16.
Vocation assessment, transition assessment.
School districts don't like doing them in detail, so you have to sign assessment plans and actually really push it.
Okay.
You really have to push the district. So that's number one. Number two, if your child is going to be going to college, then you're going to be prepping them the same way you would prep a child that does not have disabilities. However, there are lots of
the college question, though. When do you determine if your child's going to college? And if you've got a child on the autism spectrum, how do you determine what program, what college is out there? This is like a huge area that I don't know anything about. Do you?
Well, Alex Plank was on yesterday talking about exactly this. He is 27 on the autism spectrum, very wildly successful. And this was a subject he wanted to talk about a little bit yesterday. So we can go into that later. later, but I believe we start telling them early on they're going to college.
Yeah.
We can always amend that if they don't.
Right. And you set up your IEP after 12th grade. The IEP goes away, and a 504 takes place.
Okay.
Okay, so even
the 504 is?
A 504 is the adult version.
Okay,
IEP
504
is only educational K through 12.
Okay.
All right.
504. That's the big number for
and
parents.
As far as your question about colleges, I've been doing for decades volunteer college recruiting at the college fairs for my undergraduate alumni, Indiana University. And so I will tell you that parents are starting really early now with the SAT preparations. And so a lot of kids, honestly, seriously, you can start them with the SAT preps, maybe not at 7th or 8th grade, but at 9th grade. Start preparing them. There are classes, there's online classes, there are tutors, et cetera, that you can prep them for. And also what I'm finding is in California, a lot of times the families don't want to let their kids go out of state. But there are really lots of small colleges and universities all over the country that are so ready for these kids. They're making arrangements.
Yeah, I've heard there are some. One that stands out, Marshall University in West Virginia, I heard has an amazing program for ASD.
There's a lot of them.
Kids.
There are a lot. And more of the universities are starting to jump on board because they're seeing this second wave of special needs coming into the college arena, and they're all trying to capture it as well.
It's a great talent pool. My goodness, they're brilliant a lot of the times. And, And so they should be wanting to capture it. These are the kids who are going to change the world.
So you're saying that a lot of these schools are becoming not only open, but they want this market.
Yes. And you'll see more and more of them marketing to this population.
Right.
And Southern California is probably the second largest market for many, many universities.
Okay.
So we will start to see more and more of it out here. However, we, as parents, have to be willing to let our kids go and be independent. And provide. And through the 504s for college, the universities provide these services. Now everything comes under all the adult world, special needs.
Right.
And that's something I've been doing, is I've been going to universities and helping some of the college freshmen who have sort of like gotten through the cracks on their IEPs or whatever, but now they're on their own, and maybe they're not doing quite as well, so I've been helping them to access their disability departments at the universities.
Oh, great.
And we have some excellent ones here in California that are also looking for these kids and accepting them.
Can you name some of those at the top of your head?
I could, but let's save that for another time.
We can go through that.
I could provide you actually with some great lists because that's part of what I'm doing.
A blog about
that. That's a whole subject on its own.
Okay.
Now you have another group of kids who are not going to be going to college.
Right.
All right. And although we want them to, or we want them to go to a community college.
Right.
Right now, maybe at the age of 18, it's just not going to happen.
Okay.
Okay. There are vocation schools and vocation programs in high school that the kids can go to.
And are there enough of these?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely
and
not.
how do we find them?
We're pretty much out of time, so we have to wrap it up here. But what's like one thing we can do to find one of those vocation programs? What would you recommend as a parent?
Go online. For the kids that are in high school and under?
And that we know they're not going off to college. To be able to hook them up with a vocation program that's going to be meaningful to them. What would you recommend?
Okay, I would recommend two things. One, you go online to your local school district and you look up ROP programs. Okay, and they're limited to a small number of schools, but they are out there. And also look up, find out the detailed vocational programs that your school district has, because there's more out there than they're letting on.
Okay.
Great.
Good to know. Starr, this has been so exciting to have you on and hear this. We've got to have you back
We'll
on
have
again.
you back to talk more in depth on some of the things that, some of the finer points of this.
Absolutely. But thank you so much for being here. Can you say your website again so that people can know where to find you?
Yes, www.starradvocacy.com, STARR advocacy.com.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Starr. Thank you
We're
for
going to take
having
a
me.
break, and we're going to come back to finish out the show. Stick with us.
Potty training is different for every child. A child could come in with absolutely, no control over their bladder, and as long as that's not a medical issue, then we can certainly approach it behaviorally and give them the tools they need to be successful, just like any other skill that we would teach.
Well, we think he's learning to pee on the potty. No big successes yet, and lots of accidents. Here is the laundry from today.
For some of our kids takes, just a couple days. And then for other kids, it can take months and months and months. And then when you're looking at complete independence, it can take years.
Hey, you have to go pee-pee?
There's a lot of different ways to tell if a child is ready. We look for a couple different things. Probably the most important is parents saying, I need this to happen, I'm ready. Second is, a child showing interest in the bathroom, and some of it is simply age. It's time to go ahead and work on this.
What are you doing? Pooping. You're pooping?
You first start with teaching the child what they need to do on the toilet. The basic thing we want is for them to drink as much liquid as possible. It's inevitable that if you drink a bunch of liquid, you're gonna pee.
No, I can't help you pee. I can hold your hand, but I can't help you pee.
Ultimately, what we want is that, the child, as soon as they're put on the toilet, they urinate. So that's step one. Step two is usually working through the amount of time that they're off of the toilet and making sure that they're not having accidents during the time that they're off. So this is kind of the bladder control stage of things.
So the purpose of the potty log is just to see how long it takes them as soon as they sit on the potty for them to actually urinate, and the amount of time that he's able to hold his urine. And with the log, we're able to visually see how long it takes them each time and if they have accidents or not. He's on a half-hour potty schedule, so if he doesn't go when we take him, then we have to take him in 10 more minutes. So every 10-minute intervals until he does go, and then we reset the clock, and it's 30 minutes again.
Okay, buddy. Okay, last chance to go pee-pees. Do we reset it for 10?
Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean, Jack? It's potty time. We can come play after. Hurry.
What we hope happens in this time is that the kids will learn how to initiate going to the bathroom on their own. This is oftentimes the hardest part of potty training, is because they get so used to somebody telling them when they need to go that they're not really recognizing the signs just in their own body of when they need to go.
Oh, he wet himself.
Uh-oh. Big wet?
Was it a lot? We can reset to half an hour now.
The biggest thing for parents is not to give up. The other big tip, and I think pitfall that a lot of parents fall into, is putting their children back into pull-ups or diapers, especially if they're starting to have accidents. And this is probably the worst thing that you can do. They need to recognize that feeling of fullness in their bladder and take themselves to the bathroom or tell an adult that they need to go to the bathroom.
What do you have to do? You have to put your pee-pee in the potty. Okay, give it a shot. See if you can put it in there. There you go. You're doing it. Yay, Jack. Big prayer for your pee-pee. Big prayer for your pee-pee. Yay! Woo! Yay! Good job. What a big boy. High five, high five, high five, high five, high five, high five, high five. Yay!
Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And we were just talking about next week is a very exciting show. I don't know if I've got his pronunciation of his name correct, but Thorkild Sohn, Danish entrepreneur, is going to be joining us on the live show next week. This is the gentleman that, we've been talking about transition and how do we get our kids employed. And I know you and I are just really excited to have an opportunity to talk with him because he is a dad who his son was diagnosed with autism, and we always talk about how your life changes, right? And you find new vocations, and this dad decided there's got to be a better way to do this, started a program that was so forward thinking about,
started a company, Specialist Stern, and employed only ASD individuals who have proven that not only are they up to the task, the levels of efficiency are skyrocketing what neurotypical people can do in these positions. Now, what he does is he tests them, and he makes sure that he places them in positions where maybe there's a highly repetitive behavior that's going on, and so he knows, well, I'll match this person with this task. And he's bringing Specialist Stern to the U.S. and around the world. And it's really the future, I think, for autism spectrum individuals, because we will start to adapt to them as opposed to expecting them to always adapt to us, and find usages for their unique talents
and capitalize upon them in a way that's not only productive for that individual but is really productive for all of society. It's one of those brilliant things that you hear about and you think, why hasn't somebody done this before? But he is really paving the way. He's in Canada right now and has been presenting about how he's partnering with Canada, and he's going to be on our show next week. So if you have questions for him, he will be here during Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. We're very, very excited
Very excited.
So did you have a good Halloween? I have not
Well,
seen you
Halloween to me is a real nightmare always. I don't think I'm the only autism parent that says I hate Halloween ever since my son was diagnosed with autism, because in the early days, the meltdowns, of course, when I was letting him have any kind of candy. This year, we only had one meltdown. It was Sunday night. I think it was just but we had fun. He was a great little farmer, looked like a Duck Dynasty farmer, and of course, you and I were Lucy and Ethel, and I had fun with that.
I thought it was a great time. So we're out of time. We're going to be back tomorrow. Exciting show tomorrow. Be with us for that. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.